Hi friends, welcome to Raising Lifelong Learners. I'm your host, Colleen Kessler, and this is the podcast where I encourage you to trust yourself and your differently wired kiddos as you help cultivate their curiosity, encourage them to discover the world around them, embrace who they are wired to be, all while helping them discover their passions, interests, and raise them to become the amazing adults they're meant to be. Hey, welcome back. This is episode 314. I'm so glad you are here. Today we are talking all about using projects and interests to help our kids stay more motivated and learn. We are building off of last week's episode, which was focused on motivation and the difference between a lack of motivation and executive dysfunction and how to kind of tease that out. And over the next couple of episodes, we're going to talk about strategies that we can use to help motivate our kids to be more involved in their own homeschooling and to be more motivated when it comes to learning what they need to learn. Today's topic is all about harnessing their interests. So we'll talk about some of the struggles that you face when you're parenting and homeschooling from an interest-based perspective, some of the fears that we have as parents when we take this approach, as well as some of the benefits to taking this approach and how we can do it in a way that honors both our needs as parents to make sure our kids are getting all that they need in their schooling, as well as our kids' needs for autonomy and a say in what they're learning about. So it's going to be a great one. Before we begin, I want to give a special thank you to CTC Math, our sponsors for this episode. You'll hear more about them later on, but you can check them out at ctcmath.com or click through the link in the show notes in the description for this episode, because there's a special discount available to Raising Lifelong Learners listeners. And if you're looking for a great math program, you won't want to miss that discount. All right, pop those earbuds in and let's get on with today's episode. Hey there. Okay, so last week we talked all about motivation and lack thereof versus executive dysfunction and how to tease out and work with our kids when we're trying to figure out if our kids just aren't motivated or if there's something underlying going on when it comes to some kind of executive function issue or challenge and what we can do to solve it. Today, we're going to continue that conversation about motivating our kids and working with them to get them involved in their education and kind of hopefully excited about learning. Specifically, we're going to focus on project-based learning and working with their interests to motivate them. Just think about this. If your kiddo can spend 6 hours straight building a Minecraft world or memorizing dinosaur facts, or in the case of my own history with my kids, one of my kids knew everything there was to know about every kind of train that ever existed in the world, or scripting Roblox games, or even coding them, designing characters for books or stories or world building, organizing Magic the Gathering cards or a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, but melts down over a simple worksheet or one 15-minute math assignment, this episode is going to be for you. Today we're going to talk about how special interests can become real learning and why project-based pathways often work better than traditional methods for neurodivergent kids. Okay, so the question then becomes, how can I turn what my child is already loving into meaningful learning? But that also comes with a caveat and kind of a warning. We want to make sure that we're walking a line and creating a fine balance between the idea of turning everything into a learning exercise versus using our kids' interests and special passions and strengths to motivate their learning and then help them create projects based around it. We don't want everything our kids are interested in to become a learning experience, because sometimes just doing things for their own sake is what's important. It's just like when somebody gets very into a hobby and people around them try to help them figure out a way to make money off of it because of the idea that if you love what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life, right? It's the same kind of premise. Naturally, especially if we're interested in project-based or interest-based learning, will go to the opposite extreme and try to make everything into a learning experience. And that can backfire on us in many different ways. Most notably, our kids will stop telling us what they're interested in, or they'll stop participating in hobbies because they'll just feel that everything becomes learning. But it is a good way to get our kids motivated to start learning again and to realize that learning is something that happens every day, even within the things they're interested in. So when your kids are starting to resist curriculum, or traditional school methods aren't working, or their interests seem too narrow, or you're worried that they're only playing games, this is the time that you can start trying to figure out ways that you can incorporate the things that they're interested in into their learning. But I want to challenge you also to think about the fact that interests are not distractions from learning. For many neurodivergent kids, interests are the doorway into learning. It opens up the pathways for them to find out what is really their thing. So for example, an interest in, let's just use Minecraft as an example, an interest in Minecraft or Roblox or gaming in any way can open a doorway to creating worlds, characterization. So maybe open up doorways towards fiction writing or playwriting or screenwriting. Could also open up doorways for coding, for video game creation, for computer engineering, and all sorts of other things. So for neurodivergent kids, those interests can open up pathways for them. By the end of this episode, you will understand a little bit better why interest-led learning works so well for neurodivergent kids in the first place, how to create and build project pathways for your kids, how to gently expand their interests into broader learning so they're not super duper narrow, I just want to play Roblox all day, and how to support depth without turning their passions into pressure. In fact, that is a conversation that came up in a coaching call I did within the Learners Lab yesterday. We were talking about a couple of young students who were very advanced in some of their subject area work, and the parent did not really want to pursue dual credit or dual enrollment in college at this point, even though the young child has reached the end of typical 12th grade work in certain areas. So we talked about depth instead of breadth, instead of going to the next skill and the next skill and the next skill, diving deeper into application-based activities or project-based activities or research-based activities so that their kids didn't necessarily have to advance super quickly beyond their social, emotional, and like able-bodied gross motor and fine motor skills, but they still could get a deeper understanding and learning of different things. Focusing on depth and project-based learning can really be a good tool to keep in your toolbox for your kids who might need some more time on a topic because they're really interested in it, but you're not sure you want to push them to the next grade level or the next subject area before, and maybe you're getting ready to take some time off, or you've got a vacation coming up, or your child's just very socially and emotionally immature and you want to keep them roughly with the same age peers for now, so you don't want to accelerate them academically too quickly. All of those are viable reasons to look into kind of a depth-based approach instead, and project-based learning or a project pathway or going deeper in the learning is a really good way to harness the need your child might have for expansion and for challenge, but still honoring where they are socially and emotionally as kids. Interest-led learning and project-based learning works with neurodivergent kids because they often learn differently. A lot of our neurodivergent kids are greatly affected by dopamine when it comes to attention. So they need the interest and the hit that they get from doing something that gets them excited and lights them up. That's the dopamine hit, right? When we're excited about something, our dopamine receptors are affected and we're more motivated naturally to do things. And so our kids' neurodivergent brains work the same way, particularly if they have ADHD or they are autistic, because the dopamine receptors are what's going to get them over the hump of why even bother doing this? It's not something I'm choosing, because they'll be interested in the topic. They often need an emotional connection to whatever it is they're learning, because that will drive memory. And ultimately, memory is what we're going for. We want our kids to remember the things that they're learning, and we want it to be meaningful for them. So when there's an emotional connection, it becomes meaningful. Therefore, they remember it better. Also, we want to give our kids the opportunity for novelty, because neurodivergent brains often seek novelty. It's why so many of our kids can become pot stirrers when they get bored or when they're not occupied. I was talking to a friend today, and someone who's a part of our Learners Lab, about the idea of how different each of our kids can be. And she was describing one of her kids, let me backtrack for a second, the prevailing kind of expectation in homeschooling circles is, or one of the comments and pathways for helping to challenge our kids and their creativity within homeschool circles is, let them be bored, let them be kids, and let them find their own things. However, as we were discussing, her and I together today, for some of our neurodivergent kids, that just doesn't work. Letting them be bored often opens the doors to destruction, or like the poking the bear personality I've talked about before on this podcast when it comes to like my oldest son when he was young. When some kids who have neurodivergent brains get bored, they don't naturally fall into creative endeavors or play like a lot of their neurotypical peers. They fall into finding something to get that dopamine hit or seek novelty. And that can be breaking up things, taking things apart to see how they work, poking at their siblings to get a rise out of them, or whatever. When they have novelty and meaning within and embedded into their learning, it becomes more meaningful, which increases engagement. And then finally, neurodivergent kids often learn differently because autonomy changes the nervous system response. So when we give our kids a say over what they're learning by focusing on things that they're truly interested in, it gives them a better nervous system response. They're more apt to jump right in and learn the material because it is meaningful for them and interesting to them. So that means that worksheets can make them feel disconnected from the actual learning. Forced learning can feel threatening, particularly if our kids have like a PDA profile. But meaningful projects can unlock enormous persistence and even perseveration and hyperfocus when it comes to our ADHD kids. So you've probably seen this with a kiddo who won't write a paragraph at all to save their life. They will not do what you ask them to do and write a paragraph, but they'll create a 14-page Minecraft guide, or they'll write a novella about a character in a world that they've created through their dreams and their daydreams. Or you might see a child who hates reading but devours video game wikis or cheat codes and things like that, and swear up and down that they'll never do research, but they're researching all of the pathways to unlock new levels in the games that they're pursuing. Or a child who struggles with math worksheets but calculates, sticking with the Minecraft metaphor, redstone mechanics flawlessly, or they're unlocking cheat codes in their games, or even just coding. They don't want anything to do with math or algorithmic thinking or algebra or any type of very specific coding language maybe you give them to try to tap into that interest. And instead, they're on the Roblox sites creating games and figuring out ways to use the app to their advantage. This isn't inconsistency, though it often seems like it is. It's actually just contextual learning. They're learning within the contexts of the things that matter to them. And so we need to find ways to harness what matters to them and use it as a motivation point for the learning that they're doing. So one of the things that we can do is adopt a project pathway approach to some of their learning, where we're building their learning journey around curiosity and creation and real world application and connected skills. So instead of maybe saying, today we're going to do science and then writing and then math, a project pathway is going to say, let's build something meaningful, and then we'll pull all the skills involved in it along with us. So maybe your child is a budding novelist and is very interested in creating worlds. So maybe you say to them, you've got some really great ideas. Why don't you take some time today to map out what the world that you're creating inside of your head looks like, and put some of its topography down and see if you can figure out what the scale is, so that when you're picturing your characters journeying across this land, you know how long it's going to take, so you know how much time a scene might need to take in order to make sense within the context of the story that you're creating. The project becomes the container for reading and writing and mathematics and maybe even geography or social studies, or even science if you're talking about the topography and the climate and the habitats that are involved in the worlds that they're building. So being creative. Now I know that this is overwhelming and sometimes you just can't do it. I don't do this for everything that my kids have to encounter. In fact, I don't always do it at all for individual kids. I do it kid by kid, case by case, season by season, but we do still have a math curriculum that we use. I'm not personally choosing to use interests to facilitate my math learning. Like we've talked about before on this podcast, my kids use CTC Math. They are a sponsor. You'll hear about them in just a couple minutes, but I don't change that because I don't want to incorporate math into the project-based learning. I also don't feel comfortable doing that. I am too afraid of my own math understanding and the idea that I may skip some important concepts that they need later on in life to incorporate that in that way. But I do also incorporate executive function skills and communication skills and critical thinking skills. So I'm incorporating those social and emotional and thinking skills along with the things that I'm doing. And I talk about that a lot in the Learner's Lab and show families the way that they can incorporate social and emotional learning into anything that they do, even their everyday conversations with their kids. So there are things that I pick and choose when I'm choosing a project-based pathway or an interest-led learning unit or something like that. So let's use Minecraft as an example, because a lot of times parents I do often dismiss video games and Minecraft or Roblox specifically when it comes to doing the things that incorporate learning. But actually, it can do some incredible things. So let's just talk about Minecraft in general as an approach, and you can apply this to other areas if you feel up to it. But when we talk about the skills that are incorporated in building Minecraft worlds and creating the ecosystem around Minecraft, kids are reading menus and tutorials and guides. They're using multiplayer communication when they're trying to either work together or work against each other. They're using writing. They're writing signs. They're planning. They're prioritizing, incorporating some of those executive function skills in storytelling, scripting. And then further along from the writing with the executive function skills, they're also planning builds, they're sequencing, they're problem solving, they're initiating tasks, they're persevering, they're following through on tasks. If you wanted to incorporate math as a subject into the Minecraft, they're working in coordinates and geometry and ratios and resource management. You could be like me and know that's happening and still do your math curriculum on top of it, or a writing curriculum or whatever. But knowing that's being incorporated frees you up to say, okay, today you just worked on your Minecraft ecosystem, and so we're going to call it a day that was the most viable or the minimum viable day. Must-dos were accomplished in that way today. Also, creativity and engineering, you cannot discount the architecture involved or the systems thinking involved or the logic if they're doing coding through Redstone. Social skills, collaboration, negotiation, role assignment. The learning is already there. So one of the questions becomes, how do we make it visible and expandable? And is it enough? So the is it enough question really comes down to you and your child and your individual goals and values. I can't tell you if it's enough. You have to make that decision for yourself. What I can say is that as parents who are choosing to homeschool our children, it is very important for us to determine what is the best possible educational outcome for our individual children based on the goals we have for them and the goals they have for themselves, and the pathway that they need post-graduation from our homeschool so that we can set them up for whatever successes they're interested in pursuing. And so if that means that building the learning into a Minecraft ecosystem touches on all of the things that they need and want for what they're going to pursue in their life, and you can very accurately and ethically represent it on a transcript, then absolutely. If it leaves some gaps open and you know that there are things that they need for the different avenues they want to pursue, you can definitely use it as leverage to gain access to the skills that they need and then take them further so that you can accurately represent those on a transcript so it's applicable to the goals that they have for themselves in their life. So how do we do that? How do we make it visible? How do we make their learning, whether it's Minecraft or horses or nature studies or writing a novel, how do we make it visible, expandable, and applicable to what they're learning? So let's talk about 4-step project pathway framework that we can use to at least begin our homeschooling in these areas and from this perspective. So the first step is, especially when our kids are younger or we're starting to bridge that gap into middle school so that we're trying to find, what it is that really lights them up. So as we get towards high school and start thinking post-grad, we know where we can really focus our learning and our education. We want to start with fascination. What does our child return to naturally? What do they talk about endlessly? What kind of play has staying power? What kinds of hobbies do they engage in? What will they choose to do if they have no other direction given from us? Not what you think is educational. Not what you think they should harness, not what you think they should return to, what they already care about. So for example, we've already used the Minecraft example, but also insects, theater, trains, baking, animation, mythology, marine biology, Legos, engineering, architecture, storms, extreme weather, meteorology, writing, journaling, character building, world building, whatever. And then build sideways, not away. Oftentimes, we as parents naturally try to redirect. We say to ourselves, how can I turn this into regular school? How can I turn this into something that hits the benchmarks of a specific subject? How can I make Lego engineering about math, geometry, and visual problem solving? Instead of trying to redirect it so that it turns into the subject, try to expand sideways. Meaning, for example, Minecraft can become a really great lead in to a study of architecture and how buildings are formed and what types of buildings lend themselves better to different types of architecture. Pokémon or Magic the Gathering or card games like that can lead into classification, or even biology when you're talking about the monsters involved in Pokémon and the different attributes and habitats and skills and things that they have. Theater can become literature, writing, history, script design, costume design, stage management, set building, acting, vocal performance, those kinds of things. Baking can lead into chemistry. Why does the recipe matter more in baking versus cooking? Fractions, business. It stays connected to the original interest, but then expands so you're going deeper. I don't personally and professionally think cooking can replace an entire math curriculum or chemistry curriculum. I think it's a great segue into why learning about fractions and how to convert them and how to double them and half them and calculate them matters in real life application. I think it can be a really fantastic segue into understanding acids and bases and why that matters in your everyday life. But it can't take the place completely of those subjects, especially if you're interested in going into something that requires advanced mathematics or chemistry or classification skills. So stay connected to the original interest and then build on. And then step 3, so we've got starting with their interests and their fascination, building sideways, not away from. Step 3 is adding a real life project or a real project. So learning sticks when our neurodivergent kids create, build, share, solve. So perhaps they're building a biome museum in Minecraft, or actually creating a habitat within the home for an animal that they're taking on as a pet or rescuing, or that they found and out in the woods and want to observe for a few days before re-releasing it. Perhaps they want to design a bug field guide, insects and critters that can be found in your own backyard. Maybe they want to create their own podcast or a podcast episode about something that they've learned about. Maybe they want to run an Etsy shop to sell some of the things that they have created to earn some money, make a stop motion animation film, or host a family showcase. The project is what creates the purpose. So when we're following a project-based pathway, we're starting with their fascination, learning how to or choosing to build sideways onto whatever it is they're learning to then create a project that is what provides the actual learning that sticks. And then our final step in that pathway is to pull the skills along gently so it doesn't become didactic and we don't turn the stuff that they're really interested in and fascinated about into a lesson, thus potentially turning them away from something they're naturally interested in. This part matters so much because too often we as parents naturally educate them on the thing that they're doing for fun, and we can accidentally turn something that they just love for its own sake into learning and make it feel like a chore instead of something that they want to do. Instead, add tiny supports in naturally, embed the skills in the process. When they're setting up a habitat for an animal that they're rescuing, ask them to calculate the heat and the humidity ratios and where in the house is the best place for it, what kinds of substrate they need and how much by calculating cubic inches and what a bag is able to fill, calculate the costs of what they're going to have to outlay in order to outfit the habitat correctly. Some examples that you can give. Can you diagram this for me so we know what we need to put where and how much decoration we need to get? Let's make a supply budget. Do you want to dictate your instructions to me so I can write them down, or would you rather write them down yourself? Should we map this out first? These kinds of questions can help your kids think more deeply about the content and the information that's involved in what they're doing without making it seem like the interest becomes the lesson and more like you're having a conversation about how to expand what they're learning naturally so that they enjoy doing it and can continue to grow with it. Okay, so let's talk about math. Specifically, let's talk about finding a program that actually works for your unique homeschoolers. In our house, we've been using CTC Math for years, and even though I am so appreciative that they sponsor this podcast, I am a paying customer. I'm still a paying customer even with their sponsorship because it's just that good, and I love supporting great companies with great programs. With 2 kids still at home, both with very different learning needs, CTC Math has been the flexible and dependable solution that I keep coming back to. One of my kiddos needs more time to process math concepts, and I love that she can move through the lessons at her own pace without feeling rushed or behind. My other kiddo, he flies. He jumps straight to the end of unit tests to see what he already knows, and then we only focus on the lessons that fill the gaps. That kind of customization is gold when you're homeschooling gifted or twice exceptional kids. CTC Math gives you the access to every grade level from kindergarten through 12th grade with your subscription so that your child can accelerate, review, or jump around based on their own needs, not based on some rigid curriculum structure. And because it's video-based with clear instruction and auto-graded lessons and quizzes, it frees me up to support my kids without being chained to a textbook, teacher's manual, or whiteboard. So whether your child needs more time or is racing ahead, you can tailor it all with CTC Math. Check it out at ctcmath.com. You will see why so many homeschool families trust it. And if you've got quirky math learners like I do, I think you're going to love it. If you have any questions about CTC, like I said, we've been using it for years in our homeschool, and I encourage you to reach out and ask me any questions that you have. If you do pop over there, let them know that I sent you and let them know that you appreciate their ongoing support of homeschoolers everywhere, especially those of you here at Raising Lifelong Learners. All right, let's get back to today's episode. Okay. Welcome back. So we just talked about the 4-step project pathway and how to incorporate that into the different things that they're learning about and they're interested in without making their interests become the lesson, thus turning them off of their own interests. So we said we want to start with fascination. We want to build sideways, not away from it. So building on in a kind of complementary fashion, adding in a real life project, and then pulling skills along gently so it doesn't start to feel, again, very lessony and teachery. It feels more like we've got a shared interest and we're coming to a final kind of conclusion together. Let's talk though now about some of the fears that we have as parents when it comes to approaching a project-based or interest-led pathway for our learners to help motivate them. These come up all the time, right? We are so involved in our kids' education and upbringing as homeschool parents. It is natural to feel like we can't do enough because we're doing it all. And I want to address some of the things that may be holding you back from doing some more of this with your kids. One of the common fears is, what about gaps? What if I don't teach my kids these things? Are they going to learn them? I want to remind you, I've said this before, but all kids have gaps. Traditional schools create gaps too. No school teaches everything to everybody, and not a single school teaches things in exactly the same way. And so all kids will have, and actually even kids going through the same process in the same school, in the same classrooms, will be getting different pieces of the information hooking in their brains than others in their class. So all models of education create gaps. So letting go of that fear is okay, and hopefully something that I can encourage you to do, because the bottom line is our job as educators, whether it's in a traditional classroom or at home, is to teach our kids to learn for its own sake, and that there is never shame in not knowing all of the answers. And they can always ask questions, find a mentor, or find out the answers to the questions themselves. So when we approach learning from an interest-led perspective, we can create deeper retention of the things that matter to our kids, helping them understand that they are learners and they're capable of learning, so that they know how to find the information to the things that they just don't know. It also builds stronger critical thinking skills. So they're able to understand that nobody knows everything, because especially when you're learning along with them. When you're learning along with them, you're showing them that adults don't know everything, and it's okay to continue to learn long into adulthood. This is something I value tremendously personally as a parent. I want my kids to see me learning all of the time. It's one of the reasons I feel so strongly that I'm called to work from home as a writer, speaker, podcaster, author, and educational advisor and consultant and coach for parents who are either looking into the college process, because I've just started taking some classes related to that, as a lot of my audience has growing kids like I do and are starting to tackle that whole process, and supporting families who are homeschooling neurodivergent kids. I've got a lot of expertise in that area, both from a classroom and technical perspective, as well as a personal perspective. And so I feel called to do that, but I also strongly feel called to show my children that I'm learning all of the time. I'm changing and growing my business and my work in new and unique ways based on how the world is changing and evolving, and along with the needs of my audience. I am currently taking a course online, a certification course as an independent college advisor. I've been doing independent educational consulting and coaching for over a decade and a half, and now I'm working on a certification for specifically college advising, because like I said, so many of the people who have grown along with this podcast and my site now have kids entering or in the middle of high school and thinking about the college application process. And I want to make sure that I know enough to help guide them through that process. And what I know right now is only through my own experience of my individual 2 children who are involved in college classes and college pursuits. 2 kids is not enough. I need to know the ins and outs of the FAFSA and how it changes year by year, and how different colleges approach and look at homeschoolers or whomever, whatever the demographic is, gifted kids with special needs. And so a certification course allows me to understand that better, so I can better serve families who need those services. And my kids are watching me. They look over my notes each night when I'm done with today's class. or this day's class. And so they're seeing me continue to learn. I want them to know that so that they understand everybody has gaps and everybody has the ability to learn to fill those gaps. And by learning that, they develop those critical thinking skills to be able to apply that long into adulthood themselves. It also helps them learn more persistence. There is nothing like seeing your older parent, 50-something mom, taking online classes and learning and persisting, even when dinner needs to get on the table and laundry needs to be caught up on. And there's a coaching session with a client or a group or within the Learners Lab community and needing to drop everything to go do that and then get back to the class homework to finish it up overnight. Having the ability to model persistence long into adulthood as a lifelong learner teaches them that as well. So graduating with them with gaps, as long as you've shown them that learning can happen anywhere and anytime and gaps don't matter, gives them actually a gift and gives them better transfer skills that they can use to transfer that understanding and what they deeply cared about and learned about into other aspects that they're just marginally interested in, or maybe their audience is interested in if they go the entrepreneur route, or maybe is important in the field that they're pursuing and they never thought of before. So they're able to apply the skills that you teach them through interest-led learning to address those gaps. Another common fear is, what if they only want to do one thing? What if I open it up to whatever they're interested in, but all they want to do is play Roblox all day? Depth is not dangerous. It just isn't. Special interests can regulate nervous systems of neurodivergent kids. It can build confidence in kids who are already feeling othered and like they don't fit. It can help them develop expertise. Sure, it may not feel or seem like there is a need for a Roblox expert in the world. However, the skills and the communication ability and the coding that they're doing or the app building that they're creating can develop an expertise in other complementary areas. And so it's worth cultivating if you can figure out a way to harness it so that they're also touching on the other skills and you're explaining to them that some of those content area skills like writing, grammar, punctuation, math need to be incorporated too so that they can communicate ideas as they grow and develop whatever it is the career that they're pursuing as they get older is going to be. It can also create future pathways. We don't know. I've talked about this on this podcast before. We don't know what the world holds in store for our children. Technology has exponentially increased, expanded, and accelerated at an incredible rate over the last 5 years as compared to the previous decade, as compared to the previous decade before that. Every year things get faster and faster and faster. We don't know what we don't know. Podcasting didn't exist when I was going to school as a career, as a viable career option. Coaching through an online program, creating an online community of learners or homeschoolers or any of that didn't exist. Social media didn't exist. Social media didn't exist when I first started writing online, even before the podcast. We don't know what's going to exist when our kids graduate college, if they choose to go to college, but we don't know what's going to exist as they get into adulthood. So we need to create future pathways so that they can adapt to an adapting world, an adaptable world, a challenging, ever-changing world. Expansion happens more naturally when interests feel respected. Okay, here's the biggie, right? This is the one that every one of us, including myself, asks and battles with. What about screens? What if it's all screens? Ask yourself, is your child creating or only consuming? And is there communication strategy, design, or problem solving happening? So ask those questions first, and then take a really good look and evaluation, and then move on from there. So screens are tools, and they're important to use. Screens are not going away. And in fact, some would argue that we're doing our children a disservice by not incorporating screens. That said, we want our children to be creating more than they're consuming when they're using screens. So we want to figure out ways to help them use their creation skills, their communication skills, their strategy and design skills, and their problem-solving skills more often than just their consumption skills. I don't have this all figured out as a parent. I'm raising a multi-generational household of children. I have my Gen Z kids, but I also have a Gen Alpha. And I was just talking yesterday on a coaching call in the Learners Lab about how there are very real challenges when it comes to screens with our younger Generation Alpha kids. And I don't have the answers. Eliminating screens is not a complete answer on its own. Helping them self-regulate is very difficult. So finding ways to regulate without becoming punitive is a challenge. So we want to evaluate and make sure that they're creating more than they're consuming. And then we want to add in balance. Building out sketches for Minecraft builds on paper first. Creating offline extensions of what they're doing, whether that's a business or an explanation or teaching somebody else, a sibling or a friend. We want to build real world projects connected to the games or the screens. I just had an issue today with my youngest. There are very specific things that he needs to work on today and get done today. Chore-wise, school-wise, household-wise, room-wise. We're working on a build in his room, and it needs to be finished, but it cannot be finished until the floor is clean, things are put away, and it's vacuumed. And I found him with all 3 of the devices he likes to jump between in his room where they're not allowed. And when I asked him calmly and kindly to bring them to me, he did. And then about a half an hour later, I heard the television on, and he had abandoned the work in his room to watch television. So from one screen type to another was a battle we faced today. And again, the balance is in trying to not be punitive while still holding those boundaries in place and staying firm on expectations. It is tough. I don't want to deny the toughness. I will say that when you create balance and when you're focusing on the things that they're interested in more than not, the other things do become easier. Though, like with anything, when we're raising neurodivergent kids, it tends to be a 2-step forward, 1-step back approach to everything you're doing. Let me give you some real life examples of how to incorporate projects into kids based on some of their interests. And this is going to be really general, but at least it can give you a starting point when you start to try to brainstorm how to expand sideways and harness your kids' passions to follow some project pathways. Okay, so Minecraft City project. Your kiddo can create a functioning city in Minecraft that includes an economic system, a government, uses geometry to design the buildings, creates some bylaws and signs, so you're incorporating writing into it, and then collaboration. Either they're collaborating with siblings in a Minecraft world that you create, or they're collaborating with others on a server that you approve. Maybe you have a kiddo who's theater obsessed, and your child can, so you let your child study scripts for language arts, research time periods and how theater has changed over the years, incorporating maybe a timeline project, creates costumes or budgets for costumes and costume design, learns stage management and stage directions, and potentially even stages a play through your co-op. Maybe there's a Pokémon hyperfocus. Your child can use categorization skills and categorize creatures, track their statistics, write battle guides, create original evolutions. All of that is learning, and it's deep learning. And it's learning in kind of an outside-the-box fashion that can give your kids skills and resilience so that they can persevere in the other areas that become a little bit more difficult for them, or maybe are more difficult for them, like just a regular math lesson or writing a report or reading complex content. Learning sticks when emotions are involved, when autonomy exists, and by that I mean being able to have a say in what they're learning, where curiosity leads, the nervous system feels safe, and kids feel competent. That's why projects work. That's why a project pathway can help you harness your kids' interests and passions while still honoring the need to develop content in a way that is natural and meaningful to your homeschool, so you can at least move them along curricularly in areas that they need to move along in so that they can be actually eligible for the goals they want to pursue post-graduation, while still using the freedom and the flexibility that homeschool offers to give them some more interest-based learning throughout their homeschool career. Remember, you don't have to fight your child's interests to help them learn. Often, interests can become the learning pathway. And honestly, some of the most capable and creative adults that I know started as kids who were too obsessed with something. They figured out a way to fall back on their interests. I taught for years and years in a classroom, and I was good at it, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working with students in that capacity, but I always loved writing. I always loved speaking. And I, as an adult now, have found a way to harness my interests and my strengths and use them together to create a new type of career pathway that is akin to this project pathway I'm talking about in here. And some of our most successful and happiest adults are those who found a way to balance both the need to earn an income to support their family and harness the things that interest them. So encourage your kids in any way you can, while helping them understand that in order to get to certain career pathways, they have to follow certain steps. And you can do both. If this at all still feels overwhelming, I would invite you to consider joining the Learners Lab. Inside, we have monthly group coaching calls where we work through some of these things like I talked about earlier on this podcast. We can build meaningful project pathways. We can brainstorm together ways to help your kids harness the interests that they're really interested in without burnout, without pressure, without busy work, just through conversations inside the lab. The forum's available 24/7. It can sometimes be quiet and sometimes it can be hopping. Anybody is welcome to jump in there at any time and open up a conversation. We also have clubs for kids so they can get involved with each other and follow some of their own interests. And we do classes where we focus on social and emotional needs and creative thinking, as well as periodic master classes for parents who want to learn how to go more deeply into the things that their kids need. In fact, we have a guest coming up this month teaching about differentiating and creating individual plans for kids who are neurodivergent. And so that masterclass is available for free to anybody who's involved in or a member of the Learners Lab. You can join for a month, you can join for a quarter, you can join annually, and you can cancel at any time. When you join annually, you also have the opportunity for a couple bonuses. The price works out to be 10 months of the lab. So basically, when you join annually, you're getting 2 months free, and you can DM me inside the lab. Let me know that you signed up as an annual subscriber, and I will send you a signed copy of my book, The Homeschool Advantage, A Child-Focused Approach to Raising Lifelong Learners. And if you already have that book, thank you so much. I will send you any of my other books that I have. I have a bunch of other ones, Raising Resilient Sons. I have an anxiety toolkit that's a deck of cards with strategies for helping your kiddos through anxiety. And then I also have some project-based books for kids. There are rewards obviously involved with subscribing at an annual level, but the bottom line is that's where you get access to me to help you support your kids through a group setting and then through DMs, and I answer as quickly as I can within the lab. My lab members get priority and loyalty from me, and I reward you through all sorts of pop-ups and opportunities for additional office hours and Q&A calls. Consider joining us. It's a great community, and it is full of families who are homeschooling their neurodivergent kids. So I'd love to have you there. In the meantime, we're going to be back next week with another episode complementary to these topics. We'll be talking about, again, increasing the motivation by beating boredom without busy work, and kind of deepening that conversation I mentioned earlier about how some kids really just can't be allowed to be bored because the neurodivergent brain is not typical. It is neuroatypical. And as families who are raising and homeschooling neurodivergent kids, we need to figure out ways to work with the kids that we have because they're exactly who they're meant to be. And we are exactly the parents that are meant to shepherd them into adulthood. So we need to find ways to work within the ways that their brains work. So beating boredom without busy work and without destruction is what we're going to talk about next week. So come back, subscribe if you haven't already, share this episode or the newsletter along with it or the website with somebody you know who is in need of support for raising and homeschooling their neurodivergent kiddos. And reach out if you have any questions. I'm here all the time, or if you join the Learners Lab, reach out through DMs. You can get me anytime there. I will talk to you soon. I'll be back same time, same place next week with another great episode. And again, I want to thank CTC Math for continuing to support us here at the Raising Lifelong Learners podcast, but also homeschoolers in general. They are staunch supporters of homeschooling, and you can hear about them all over the internet from homeschoolers everywhere and here weekly. So thank them for supporting us. And if you're looking for a great math program, you cannot go wrong with CTC Math. Check them out, ctcmath.com, or click over through to the show notes because I have a unique link that not only lets them know that you heard about it on the podcast, but also gives you a great discount. So take advantage of that if you're considering starting out with CTC Math. They also have a money back guarantee, so it really is no lose to give them a try and to let them know that you came from here so that they'll continue supporting our efforts. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Have a great week. Love your kids. You're doing a fantastic job, and I'm so proud of you. Bye for now.